So this is where we left off in our last tutorial where we talked about GUI content, and what GUI content allows us to do is display an image with some text. And so now we have a clickable button and it says order up. The next thing we're going to go over is tooltips. Now tooltips are, you can read about them in the Unity reference, but the only issue is that they don't necessarily teach you how to use the tooltip with using a clickable button. And what a tooltip simply does is, as you scroll over a button, a text box or a text area can appear below it, and it can tell you what that button does. So this button is for health, this button starts the game, or what have you. So let's go ahead and create a tooltip. So the GUI content function allows you to have another parameter, and that's the tooltip parameter. And so it's pretty easy. All you do is put a comma, and so we know this is the text that's going to be on the button. This is the image, which is a 2D texture that we're going to put on the button. And then this one we're going to do whatever text we want. So for example, we can say this button will load our pizza game. Okay, exclamation point. And so the way that it looks within the Unity reference is that you would simply write GUI dot label, and then within that label you'll have two parameters, which is one is a rect and it's the size. So let's say 10, and I'm going to go actually really a lot lower. Let's go 100 because our button is pretty massive. And that's in our Y position, and then the size I'm going to keep it the same, 300 and 150, because I want it to be about the same, my label to be about the same size as the button. And then in here all you would write is GUI, which is the class, dot tooltip. Now tooltips are found in any programming language that has any web component. So for example, in Java, like they have tooltips as well, so that like if you scroll over any buttons on a website, all of those are actually called tooltips. So again, so you're not going to actually see it work right now because I'm doing it exactly according to sort of the way that the Unity reference looks. So if I hit play right now and I scroll over, you'll see that nothing appears. So to sort of fix that, what you have to make sure that you do is you cut this out and you make sure that your if statement only produces whatever you want. So if you want it to produce pizza boxes or start the level or whatever, you'd put that code within this if statement, and then outside of this, just directly preceding it, you'd put your tooltip. So if you were going to create another button, you'd actually have to create it below this tooltip in an if statement, and then below that you'd have to, if you wanted another tooltip for that button, so you'd have to follow this exact same order. So let's go ahead and hit Control S and press play. What you'll notice is now there's our tooltip. It says this button will load up our pizza game. Let's go a lot lower. I'm going to go, because the size of our button is 300, so let's go 400 or 350. And let's save that, and let's make sure our comma is in there so we don't get an error. And now when I go over that button, looks like it's still hiding. Let's, did I do that? 350. Let's try it again. Let's do 300. Tooltip, it's outside. Let's press play. There we go. It's all the way down there. So it's actually off the screen. So we might have to go a little bit lower than that. But you can see this button will load our pizza game. So, okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at how do we create a button that will allow us to, when we hold it down, it'll continually click or it'll continually run. So we don't have to constantly be clicking one button. Well, there's a button within Unity called the repeat button. And so all we have to do is write function on GUI again. There we go. Open, close, curly braces, or parentheses, curly braces. And then we have to do GUI dot, well, let's make it clickable. So if GUI dot repeat button, and so this is the repeat button, and it has two parameters. One is the size, so rect. Let's do 25, comma 25, comma 100, comma 30. And let's hit a comma here, and let's just give it a name, so it can be spawn cube button, so you can pretty much guess what we're going to do. Alright, and then within this, what we can do is jump back to our test script and just copy this instantiate cube. So if you don't have the test script handy, just pause the video and type this line in. And you're also going to need the variable that stores the cube with a rigid body. So that's this guy. Alright, so now what we're going to have is when we go ahead and look at our GUI, you can see now we have an open variable that will store a cube prefab with a rigid body. So let's drop that on there. And so when we hit play, you can see spawn cube, but let's go ahead and give it more space, because that's another thing that you have to make sure is that you're giving enough space to your buttons. So let's say 200 here. Let's save that and see how big that looks. That looks a lot better. So now when I left click and I hold down the button, you can see, and I'm not clicking multiple times, all it does is continue to spawn cubes. If you really want to see the effect, what we can do is, let's find our GUI game object. Let's hit F to focus. He's right here. And let's actually, here's a trick. If you want your main camera to be in the same location, you can drag your main camera and drop it on the GUI. And then if you left click and reset position, it'll be set right on top of your GUI. So now if we move this back, and if we want to, and we detach it, let's go ahead and add a light, game object, create other, directional light. We just kind of rotate this down, and then let's create a plane. So we have a place where our cubes that spawn can sit. Let's just make sure our GUI game object is a little bit higher than our plane. So now if we press play and we click our button, you can see they're loading up all over our plane. Let's zoom out a little bit our camera so we can see that a little bit better. And so that's kind of what our repeat button does. Just by holding it down, you can sort of keep repeating that one line of code. It actually updates every 1 second.